Good afternoon and happy Saturday to all of you, and or whatever day it is that you're tuning into this stream session and checking this out. And I imagine if you did tune into this stream session, the reason is because you found that the title was intriguing. It's a little bit different from what I normally stream Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Some form of ground school and sim stuff going on where I'm thinking of including some DCS nights or some community flying nights, but a lot of them typically are around ground school and aviation education, some sort of flight simulation or flying skills type thing. And one of the things that I wanted to do differently today, that I would like to do differently in going forward in the future as well, is to interview some of my followers and my subscribers that are actually student pilots that are going through the flight training themselves, and just to get some insight into what their experience is in was going through their training, and to provide some insight from their point of view for the viewer, and other people out there, aviation enthusiasts that are maybe thinking about going through their training, or even people that are certificated pilots already that just want a fresh perspective on where the standards are at these days. And what, it's always, plus it's just, no matter who you are, it's interesting to hear other people's perspectives on going through something like that. So essentially what it is the check ride is the final exam. Anytime you go in for a new pilot's license, or we call them colloquially a license, but they are very much a certificate. A certificate or a rating. Anytime you're going for a new certificate or an addition, like a rating, an add-on to your certificate, what you are, excuse me, what you're going to first of all, what you're going to do is need to undergo a certain types of things throughout your training. You're going to have to accumulate certain types of aeronautical experience and ground instruction from an authorized instructor to complete that training. But at the end of the day, you've got to go for what's called a check ride, and that check ride is essentially your final test. That's all of your training, all of your preparation has gone toward this one moment where you're sitting across from an examiner, and they are a very experienced person that the FAA has designated to be an examiner. Not anybody can be an examiner. And you need to walk through what are called the airman certification standards, or the practical test standards, depending on what type of thing you're doing. But there's a set of standards that are enumerated by the FAA that you are both walking through together, and piece by piece, you are needing to go through all these standards and demonstrate your knowledge about these topics, demonstrate your ability to manage and mitigate risk, and incorporate your own personal minimums and things like that into your decision, and having good decision making. And then also to demonstrate that you have the skills to actually complete these tasks, and to demonstrate that you can actually do it. Not only that you know what certain things are, not only that you can make good decisions, but can you actually go do the thing, So with that, let me actually pull up the standards right here. Airman certification standards for the private pilot. And today we've got one of a buddy of mine that's been following the channel for some time now. He's always engaged. He's always really positive and supportive. I know he's been helping me quite a bit with feedback as I'm a new streamer, and just a really, really cool guy. And I think you're gonna. I know I'm really looking forward to talking with him about his experience going through his private pilot check ride. He just passed his private pilot check ride. And I know I'm really excited to talk with him about his experience going through that private pilot check ride. What is his experience with the examiner? How was his training? How was his check ride prep? And just to kind of just have a normal conversation. It's not like any formal interview, but What you're gonna be listening to today, I'm gonna hop on the Discord right now and call him up, and it's gonna be a cool interview there. Let me actually just get these standards up right here. All right. And let's see here. We are in the voice channel. And Zach, can you hear me, buddy? Oh, you know what? Let me I think you're muted right now. I'm trying to unmute you, but I mean, I didn't mute you. You should be able to unmute maybe yourself. Let's see here. Yeah, he's muted. Shouldn't be muted though. Oh, there you are. You there, buddy? Oh, the room might require a push to talk. It shouldn't. Let's see. I am new to this, but I know that it does work. I know that I've talked to Dragon in there. I've talked to Elios. And if worst comes to worst, what I can do is just add you and then just call you like just as a regular Discord call. I know you're a The other thing is you. Oh, you know what? So I know you subscribe to me, Zach, and I believe that audio and video is only a Twitch subscriber function for my privileges that I assigned to this chat. So I think what that tells me is that your Twitch is not linked to your Discord, because I believe you're a subscriber. So let's do this, because I don't think it's a push to talk. I think it's totally open chat. So instead of requiring you to go sync up your Twitch and all that stuff, like what I'm gonna do is just send you a friend request. I'm surprised we're not actually already, and we'll just do like a regular voice call. So just accept the friend request, and then I'll call you on there. Okay, and then this, we should be able to, there you are, kind sir, and give this guy a call. And it should just be voice at your request.
Hello?
Hey, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, sir.
Sweet.
You can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
All right, very good. Now I'm just gonna make sure that I don't get like a bad echo or anything. So I'm gonna kind of manage my volume there. Zach, what's going on, buddy? So I can't tell you how excited I am to actually be on the phone with you and just chat and to get your experience, because you've been following the channel for some time now, and you and I have talked, and just a really cool guy. So definitely welcome, and thanks for like doing this, dude. Thanks for hopping on to discuss today.
Yeah, no problem.
You are actually coming from, so Zach is actually an instructor as well, but for scuba diving, which I think is really cool. There's apparently a lot of crossover between aviation and scuba. So what was going on today with your, was that like a new student or something that you were out there teaching some cool scuba lessons?
Yeah, just doing some basic pool stuff for before you go into the actual open water stuff. Um,
Setup stuff, just
yeah,
like some prep, maybe some pre-flight prep for scuba.
yeah, it's kind of like the first 10 hours of ground is the first thing you could liken it to, I guess.
Sure. Okay, yeah.
Or
So
sorry, for
so
first 10 hours of actual flight time actually.
first 10 hours of actual flight time. Yeah, so really just like good habits maybe, and like what some of the fundamental tools are that are at your disposal. And I'm sure that something, there are like lessons in scuba that go into like good decision making and like equipment checking, setup and minimum equipment and stuff like that, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I got a lot of my starting good habits for flying came from actually.
Hmm. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. And I think that that was actually one of my first questions that I had. I mean, I have no questions written. Like you and I were talking, like, shouldn't be a problem really, just having a quick chat about your experience going through this private pilot check ride. But one of my first questions actually was like kind of a non-standard question, like, so what was the training like? And like, wow, were you nervous? No, no, no. Like, first of all, like, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to answer those questions, but I do want to know actually your perspective on that. But really, I'm dying to know as an instructor for something else. Did you feel like you were going into this check ride with an advantage of some kind? Because so much of it is like an interview, like this private pilot check ride's like an interview that requires people skills, requires good judgment, and demonstrating certain things, and that's like fundamental to you being an instructor. So, did you feel like you had an advantage going into it from this other sphere of professionalism that you're coming from?
Yeah, definitely in like the mindset area of it, because you have to really understand things well, and you also have to have the, I don't know how to say it, but the basis mindset of I don't know anything.
Yeah.
I'm brand new at this, and being at the top end of another category of some other activity, um, that transfers over well into another one as far as attitude goes.
Mm.
Other than that, I mean, the interview process for scuba stuff is not nearly as rigorous as flying is, but it definitely helped me in the during talking to the check pilot and understanding what I needed to do.
Definitely. Like that I'm so much there like that's so important for like airmanship, whether you're an instructor or a brand new student, or like a brand new pilot, is that humility. I feel humility is something that's really important. You mentioned an awareness of like part of having a big picture awareness is like I have such a long road to go, and that's fun. That's great. That's what I want. Actually, I want that, and I'm not only am I okay with that, but that's exciting to me. um
Hmm.
but there's like a reality there that's like you cannot, for example, I can't tell you how many students I've worked with. Check ride prep is like one of my favorite things to do, because it's like right at the end, and you're really like challenging the student in very important ways. And students that are finally at the end of their training, or whatever the required training is, of course, like you ideally keep learning, but they're really nervous actually, and so they want to posture like they got this, and they're like, because I know stuff now, and they're really proud of where they're at, because it is a great deal of information for where you started. At the end of your private pilot training and going into your check ride, yeah, you know some stuff. You absolutely know some stuff. You know a lot of things actually. And but yet they're posturing in the wrong direction. They're like, I'm gonna show this guy what I know. And it's like, I don't think anything shows a bigger disconnection from the actual path and the big picture than that perspective, especially going into a private pilot check ride. So yeah, humility is super important.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for understanding that is a long time ago I saw this thing. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it's this kind of bell curve where you start off thinking that you know a lot more than you do, and the more that you actually learn, the more that you understand that, oh, I really don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
And being on the spectrum in that, in scuba, where I started off thinking I was super good at it, and then just learning, and then eventually getting to the point where now I actually do know what I'm doing, and I can make informed decisions about safety and stuff.
Right. Such a good point. I don't know if this is I think I've seen that curve, right? Like there's like it's like it's like the bottom axis is like time and like therefore like experience, because with more time
Yeah,
obviously you have more experience, right? But then it's like confidence and being prone to accidents are like totally positively related. So you could put them on the same axis actually, and basically in the beginning it's like boom, a spike, because it's like low time, so very low on the x-axis, but the y is very high.
yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of like obviously curves up, because throughout the training you're super insecure, like you're not, you are constantly encountering things that remind you like how little you know, right? But then you actually start learning stuff, curve goes up,
hmm,
and then boom, accident prone for sure, because your confidence is way higher, way too late, way too early on the x-axis. And then as you like as you go along, it's like confidence kind of goes down, and you realize like these things, like you're saying, one of my favorite phrases, Dragon just kind of alluded to it, is the more you learn, the less you know. And I absolutely
yeah,
love that phrase. And that is like the goal. That is understanding, that is like, that's some wisdom right there. And then you go through, and the more you learn, that the less you know. It's like you bring that confidence a little bit down as well, because you're like, whoa, like maybe I don't. That's like humility setting in. And then an interesting thing happens like on the far end though as well. That curve starts increasing, and then you got these accident reports of super experienced pilots um exercising just decision making that you would never expect somebody with that experience make, to have that decision making that you would never expect them to have. And it all, I mean, it's kind of, I don't want to attribute it to like hazardous attitudes only, because obviously it's like accident chain, we know about accident chain, right? But the fact is a lot of the time, it is complacency or some other type of hazardous attitude that like often accompanies a lot of experience. So the shape of that curve is pretty interesting, I think. um
yeah.
yeah. So that's really cool, man, that going into your private pilot check ride, like I'm sure that you were able to emphasize judgment and decision making, and go through the interview process really really well. That's awesome, bud. By the way, just formally, like, congratulations, dude. Now that I got you on the phone, like, that's super dope. That's
Yeah,
really,
thank you.
yeah, that's really really cool, man. That's really really cool that you can, you know um all I see is that you're having a hard time staying in one place, bro. You're under the water, you're in the air, like, bro, like, relax. No, I'm just kidding.
Going for cave diving next.
Dude, just take a GoPro, man. That's what I was telling you about, that how it's no stuff you should know, or stuff to blow your mind or whatever, when they were talking about cave diving. And like it just was so, it's just the fact that there are levels of that are just like, it's just crazy, man. So but I think what goes into both is like a bravery, a courage, a respect for what you're doing. They seem like very technical things. So before your so it seems like you already had an appreciation for the technical nature of and embracing something rather technical, the studying that would need to go into that. I imagine going into your flight training, you were already kind of geared up for that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually study as much as I wish I would have
Oh, say
during
that
all the
again.
flight
You said
training.
you say that again.
I really wish I would have studied actually a lot more during flight
Gotcha.
training. I'm not a very good student most of the time.
Interesting.
So there was a big miscommunication actually in the beginning of my flight training, where my instructor thought I was doing an online ground school. So we kind of just neglected to do any ground until my written exam, which was close to 6 months into training.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So definitely miscommunication there, because you don't know, in the very beginning, you're like, what knowledge test, or like maybe you knew about
Yeah,
it, but you're like maybe unsure of when at some point, surely my instructor will, they're guiding me. So I'm doing you're kind of in that mode of doing what you're told, versus like the instrument rating, the commercial, you can be a little more assertive, like it's more of a, it's more dynamic, I think, the training between you, the exchanges between you and the instructor versus private. You're kind of just at, you're not docile or passive, but you are kind of like really, you're like not sure,
Hmm.
So so yeah, um that's a bummer. So yeah, so you guys had a little bit of miscommunication there, and you mentioned that you weren't that, that good of a student. I mean, is it also how much what do you wish you would have done differently in terms of the studying then, or in what ways could you have improved as a student?
I definitely could have just taken more initiative on my own and not waiting for that deadline for the written exam to get so close before I really started, diving into the details. Because my knowledge had been very broad throughout all of flight training because I did most of the learning of ground stuff in the cockpit actually. Um, and once that written started coming up, we were doing practice writtens and stuff like that, and I realized that my brain was just not far enough into the studying to where I was detail oriented about specific things, and that was a major shortcoming of where
Mm,
I needed to be.
yeah. Orient or initiative can be tough to know like what to have. Sorry, I'm like trying not to die. um I will be okay. Yeah, the initiative can be tough, like, but at the same time, as tough as it is to know like what to have initiative about, like how do you know, well, the thing is the resources are out there, I think about a student that I have right now. I've just finished making a couple of Instagram videos, and one of them is I've got a series of student showcase videos that I'm definitely going to post to this guy. Is just phenomenal, I have a lot of really good students right now, but this guy in particular, man. I mean, like he, in talking about initiative, I mean, he went and like made his own, laminated his own like airport diagrams, um, personal checklists, things like that. Obviously, you're going to use the written checklists at certain points to verify compliance, but we're talking about like cigars. We're talking about pre-take or the pilot briefing that includes several items regarding the departure and the emergency briefing. The passenger briefing, the safety, as is a popular acronym. um, and so these items, he's got these things all dialed in various phases of the flight, and he's out there like really taking checklist usage seriously, and I think that there are other ways of doing that, but he had the initiative not only to do it, but he had the humility circling back, like, listen, like I have a long road ahead of me and there's a lot to come, so I'm not going to expect myself to memorize everything and just, spend 10 lessons gradually failing less and less and less at these routine things. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go make myself these checklists that I have to do every single time, and hop to it, dude. Like, go and run them in my mind, like run them chair flying and various things. Initiative, very very important. And I think, can you speak to your experience regarding initiative, like that you undoubtedly had, like maybe toward the latter half, or later. Obviously, you passed your check ride, so you're you made you adapted and you made the changes. Can you speak to work ethic and kind of like you get what you give in aviation? That's one of the things that that's one of the other mantras that I really believe in terms of um, having initiative and having good work ethic, is you totally get what you give in a lot of the time in aviation. Is that your experience as well, or is that kind of something that you're gonna like kind of turn it up to? You have yet to kind of turn it up to a 10, and you want to do that with your instrument rating, or what? Can you speak to those ideas?
Yeah, I mean, during the beginning, I was like super lax, not really worried about the knowledge and having my skills in the airplane actually up to, better than standard. And about 3/4 through my training, the instructor that I had been with had he moved away, and I transitioned to another instructor who was a whole lot more, hard on their pilots. And from there, it was a total wake up call to what I actually needed to be doing.
Mm,
And from there, I could actually start to turn it up and
right.
genuinely put in the effort to be not just two standards but better.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. Um, how did you respond to such a change of gears? You know, like I know over the years, like I've met many different instructors and several types of instructors, you know, and I've definitely even had the tough love instructors. I've had instructors that didn't push me as much as I wish they did. I've had really ground heavy instructors. I've had instructors that are like, ground, eh. And it's like, what do you mean that? You know, so how did you respond to the changing of gears with those instructors? How did it make you feel? Were you ready for that? Did you appreciate that? And how did you respond to that, like, kind of tough? It sounds like it was a tough love situation as well, maybe, or am I kind of not? Do I not really have that right?
No, no, it definitely was. It was like I was blindsided by the level that she expected me to be at, basically. Like we went up for the first time, and I was ready for a check ride a month prior, but then the haze rolled in, and we
Okay.
couldn't really do anything because it was like six miles of visibility. So at this point, it'd been close to a month of me being off flying, and we went back up and we started flying, and not one of my maneuvers was within standards. And she let me know for sure, and it was uncomfortable to start with, but I'm glad that I had somebody to push me like that towards the end.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so much more important to know that you didn't, we don't know what we don't know. And so, like, I feel like, you seem kind of like the kind of guy that would see that those new lessons as like opportunity rather than like, a reason to be defensive or granted that it is uncomfortable, it is uncomfortable, but it's so important, I think, to see opportunity in the discomfort, the ability, to see opportunity for growth. This is a good thing, that you're being shown. It's not somebody that's getting in your way. um you now, and you can kind of wrestle with the, God, why didn't he teach me this? Why? Because I've had students come to me from other instructors, and they're like, well, why did I'm so upset, like my instructor didn't teach me this, they didn't show, why didn't they show me that, why did they do it like this? And they are wrestling with that, as I'm sure you might have, maybe not, but I always tell them, like, listen, different people do it different ways. I try and do things in ways that across as many different scenarios you can be successful. Procedures that over a broad range of scenarios, this procedure will work. But honestly, it's not about the. I think we do need to look to the past, and we do need to kind of adjust our, make important changes based on looking backward, but we got to move forward. Like, you're here now, like, let's catch up, like, and then let's just start today. You're here right now today. Let's set better habits. Like, let's, did you have any of that, like, kind of, I feel like that can kind of get in the way of progress, of like those feelings of like, dude, well, why isn't this the case? Did you have any of that, or were you pretty forward moving from that point?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to pretty much move forward from where I was,
Cool.
you know, technically wise. Um,
Yeah. Very good. Very, very good. That's awesome, man. So you're going through your training, and you go through the solo, you do, which I imagine was nuts. By the way, can you talk for those people that will be watching, just so they know? So, you passed your private pilot check ride. We're definitely building up to that, and I do want to get to a point where it's like the check ride prep I'm really curious about, and the actual check ride experience itself. But just for the people watching that don't know, so what aircraft were you using, and can you speak to the aircraft uniqueness and the area, the airport uniquenesses, or maybe not the uniqueness because it's your experience, so you can't, it might be hard for comparison, right? But I can say with confidence that people do not use traditionally an aircraft that you used. They use an aircraft that's a little more simple and a little less powerful, quite a bit less powerful, oftentimes. And they definitely don't operate out of airports as high up above sea level as yours. And the thing about
Yeah,
that is, it affects the performance of the airplane. So, can you talk about the aircraft and about the environment?
yeah. So I flew in a 172 XP, the extra performance variant of the 172. It's kind of between the 172 and the 182. So it's a constant speed propeller. So it had 210 horsepower, which was pretty necessary for, we're sitting down at 6,300 feet elevation, and most days are, in the summer close to 8,000 feet density altitude.
Yeah. So, density altitude meaning, can you describe for the listeners that might not be under, a lot of the folks that are like coming to this stream are flight sim, folks, and not that they wouldn't know what that is, but they might not have, be as intimately familiar with it from a real life standpoint as you. So can you describe, like, what's the effect? What do you mean by like 8,000 foot density altitude? Is it 63 or 6,400, or is it 8,000? Which is it?
Yeah. So the elevation is 6,300 feet, and there's a specific density of that air down there. Um, and density altitude changes. So you take pressure altitude and you adjust it for non-standard temperature, and from there you get a different density of air. So we're at 6,300. If it's cold out, it's going to be closer to that 6,300 feet, and if it's way hotter out, that air is going to be less dense and is going to be higher density altitude.
Right. And so that, the whole thing with airplanes is we need air to do what we do, right? So with less air, for those reasons that we would have less air. So with less air, this aircraft is gonna alter the performance of this already higher than average powered airplane. You're gonna be eating up more runway than you otherwise would on a standard day. You're coming in, that's both from a takeoff and a landing standpoint. The greater the difference between the speed that you're being told that you're going by your airspeed indicator and the actual true airspeed, that difference increases with the thinning of that air. And so, you're being told that you're doing 120 knots, right? But no, you're doing what I imagine sometimes true, depending on your altitude, but true airspeeds in probably in excess of 135, 140 maybe, or something like that.
My true air speeds for typical cross country is usually about between 105 and 108.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not actually sure why that is, but the POH is what I always looked at, and that's what it was telling me.
That's pretty odd. So then is that assuming what, like a 90 or like 90 indicated?
Um, Let me actually go bust
Not
out
to
my
put you on the
POH
spot
thing.
or something. I'm just really surprised. I mean, you're talking about 210 horsepower, with 8,000 foot density altitude, and a constant speed propeller that's able to actually get that thrust going, and actually change that angle of attack and get that thrust going. Um, I thought for sure you would be cruising, because I mean, down here at sea level in like a regular 182, like an SP, like a 180 horsepower SP. I mean, we'll cruise. I mean, I won't have a student do it, but I mean, I'll routinely cruise at like 115, or even push it
Hmm.
like yeah, like maybe 115 or something indicated, and then you go up maybe on a warm day at like 5,000 feet. I mean, you're definitely you got some speed going on, So, um, And like for the 182, so the fact that yours is somewhere in between that and the 182, we'll be doing. Well, I'll definitely do like 140 indicated, yeah, probably like 140 indicated, and then up at let's say 6 or 7 thousand feet. I mean, easily 150 true, easily. If not more, maybe 155, like 160 maybe true, and then you add like a 10 knot tailwind on that. So but that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that, but added complexity nonetheless. Speed or not, like added complexity for sure. Um, how was that? Did that get in the way of the standard training at all, or not as much?
In the first 10 hours, it was a lot to worry about the prop, the manifold pressure, the cowl flap, plus dealing with everything else that you would normally do on a beginning flight.
Mm.
Flying the patterns, especially in those first few hours, touch and goes, and right after you make the crosswind turn, you're doing 10 different things, and it's a little overwhelming. But I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it in one.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very cool, man. Very cool. So you're operating out of this high density altitude airport. You got this greater than higher than average complexity aircraft, and getting a lot of great experience, really firsthand, performance wise, procedurally. You're going through your first solo. I imagine that was crazy. The we have a question actually from Caleb. Go ahead. Caleb Duran. Not Caleb Duran. Caleb One Duran. I did my first 20. Let's see here. Does a plane have a horn? Does a plane have a horn? You mean like for traffic, or like if you like right of way rules, like instead of going to the right, you can just like slam on the horn and then they're like, "Whoa." Um, is that what you mean, Caleb? Like on the steering wheel or something? Like a beep beep. Okay, so it actually an aircraft does not have a horn like a beep beep, but it does have a stall horn, usually, and that'll kind of tell you if something is going wrong, but not a horn like what you're saying. On the airport surface where you would be taxiing, you gotta just kind of see and avoid, and there's like conduct that how you can stay safe down there and not be somewhere that you shouldn't be. So back to what we were saying as far as your training, and as you're nearing, so then you go through your solo cross country. Um, what was that like? Like when you're going through your cross countries, you're not, you're out there in like beautiful country, but there's not a lot out there pilotage wise. Did you feel limited in terms of your abilities to develop adequate navigational skills, particularly in the areas of pilotage? Or do you feel like there were enough options out there that you actually are pretty, you're pretty set, pretty square?
Yeah, there checkpoints and places to look for are a little bit harder to find out here, but we've got plenty of rivers and streams and mountain peaks that you can kind of guesstimate on.
Hmm.
So it's not quite as accurate, but it'll get you most of the way.
Very cool. I noticed that there's some like VORs out there too. So I mean, at the end of the day, like some bend in the river or something like that, you could probably cross up a VOR. I imagine you're really utilizing the cross radials to kind of confirm a spot or something. I meant
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. That's pretty nice too. Um, pilotage is like so important, but VOR skills, you know, utilizing them in the right way, I think is like very like under, at least what I've seen sometimes. We try not to, especially here in LA. We have VORs all over the place, but I see it as a very like underdeveloped skill with instrument students. Everybody can use better VOR skills, but a lot of the time, if you have so much on the ground to look at, and you just not really utilizing them, or you're utilizing them sparingly, or maybe you lost procedures or something, but you fly like an airway, but you don't really you don't really sharpen the blade too much with the VOR training. And
Mhm.
whereas with you, it sounds like, it's pretty pivotal to use all three with limited sort of spots out there. So that's
Yeah,
cool.
pretty much every flight we were doing, location checks, biangulating, triangulating our position with VORs.
Very nice. Very, very nice. Cool, man. So um so then you do your solo check ride, and you start you do your nighttime stuff, and you're going through your check ride prep with your instructor. This is like a phase of the training where the student is like gearing up for their check ride. Like a lot of the final questions are being answered, and right now it's just about you exercising over and over again the right procedures, verbalizing these things, making sure that you're going through your checklists, that you know your emergency procedures, and that you're on top of fuel spending, your fuel consumption, how much time has gone by, can you adapt to certain situations, and that like more high level stuff. Um, by the time, so how did check ride prep go for you? How did you actually? I imagine check ride prep. I know for me is very multifaceted. Obviously, some of it's in the airplane, some of it's on the ground. Um, did the instructor that you ended up with like emphasize one or the other? Do you feel that the different facets were well balanced? What was your experience high level going through check ride prep?
Yeah, so I kind of had two sets of check ride prep. One before my first instructor left, when we were like 50% sure I was going to pass, but not quite. And then I took the month off, and then the new instructor, we did probably about 10 hours of flying and probably another 25 of ground school. Um, so we would go out and we'd fly for an hour or two, and then we'd come back in and just sit down for 2 to 3 hours just going over the ACS. Um, and that was super super rough for the 2 weeks that we were doing it, because it was just so much information, and I felt so unprepared for where
Yeah,
I needed to be at that point.
yeah.
So it was rough, definitely.
Mm. I relate to that a lot. I hear that it was rough going through, as humble as you are, and as familiar with the learning process like as you are as an instructor. It's like it's got to be really rough, like gearing up for a check ride and still so consistently coming and encountering things that you didn't know that you didn't know that you should have known for quite some time, that it would have been
Yep.
really great to have known for some time, so that you could have just been molding and sharpening, instead of just now discovering certain things, or so that can be pretty nerve wracking, and I relate to that a lot. Like my my first of all, my first instructor I had for like 4 lessons like hated his job, so that didn't last long. But the I might have even had him for only 3 lessons. But then really my first instructor, we're the same age, and I was like going through this through my early 20s and stuff, where this is like a young dude, like really meeting a very substantial challenge. As I'm an amputee, and I was using a prosthetic arm at the time, and he really gave it a valiant effort, like to get me along as far as best as he could. We innovated a lot of things like with the prosthetic arm, and but ground, as much as he tried, ground was not an emphasis. This ground knowledge was not the primary focus. It wasn't even a secondary focus. I felt like, it was tertiary, and just sort of an afterthought. And that was my attitude about it, consequently, because, as instructors, as like we lead by example. So I'm like, okay, cool. It doesn't matter that much. I like flying anyways. So there you go. I mean, it's flight training. So, I mean, I'm over here to fly, I guess. Um, then he goes to the airlines. He like leaves, maybe like I actually solo cross countryed with him. There's some interesting stories that I have along this private pilot training. Like I was on a stage check for solo cross country, and my prosthetic arm actually broke in the middle of a flight, and I couldn't repair it actually. But we could talk about that another time. But like, so this guy's really trying, but then he like after my solo cross country, we were like kind of check ride prep ish, and he leaves for the airlines like super abruptly, like didn't even say anything, until he was just like, oh yeah, we'll try and figure it out, like we'll figure out a guy. It's like texting me, and then I meet this guy who is like this insanely like gold seal, like crazy cool good instructor, just like one of the best, I mean, out there, and totally changes my life. He just changes my perspective. He was very ground oriented, very like procedure oriented, and this is not about flying. I'm assuming that you can fly, which was very cool, especially as an amputee, to have somebody give me the benefit of the doubt and assume that I was there. I had soloed, I had my solo stuff done, I had solo cross country. My long solo cross country was done actually. So he's like, obviously you can fly, but you like, we were in check ride prep for like 4 months because not only did I not know so much of what I should have known, but his standard was like out of control, great. But come to find out, that's actually the standard that we should be setting for. It's a standard. It's not. There's not a high standard. It's a it is a standard. And so it was really uncomfortable to learn so much that I didn't know. But and it was kind of rough, to be going through check ride prep for like months and months and months. But you got to go through it and like fill those holes, I guess. I was relieved at a certain point too, but dude, I mean, it is rough to be so consistently given, yeah, like experiencing stuff that you should have known that you didn't know that you didn't know. Yeah. So yeah, it's really fortunate that we can meet these instructors here. So you got caught up through your check ride prep, and when you were did you have what were like some examples of some like of the most important aha moments, if you can think back to that check ride prep and learning all of those things that you didn't know, like what were a couple of important aha moments that you would hope that other student pilots applicants would have for themselves check ride prep?
Yeah, number one is trim is definitely your best friend.
No shit, dude.
It took me so long to start utilizing trim in the way I needed to be to make my landings, my patterns, everything really consistent. And it totally changed the way I was able to fly after that. Another one was a lot of my maneuvers were just barely outside of standards, and I could never quite get them consistent for some reason. And my instructor just giving me tips on especially like in steep turns, don't focus on anything else but your airspeed and your VSI. Anything else, and looking outside.
Yeah, obviously.
Those are the only three things you need to be checking, stuff like that.
Love it. Yeah, dude. First of all, trim. I just have a question about that. So with regard to trim from an instructor's standpoint, I mean, I would say 8 out of 10 students when you're first, especially when you're not that far into the training, they can't even like, they don't trim because it's like, your plate is always so full. And so many different plates are like spinning and stuff. So like, one thing I try and emphasize is like, dude, if you could just find the space to utilize your sight pictures to stay ahead of this process, but utilizing power and pitch together to get the plane to do what you're going to do, what you need it to do. So you can already start bringing that water level down from like right here. You can start bringing it down and like swim a little bit better. Dude, if you could just add one more thing, if you could just add your trim, proper trim to your regimen, like you can add one thing and then acts like 3 or 4 things. If you could just properly trim. And is that, in your experience, what you find as well?
Yeah, definitely. Because for the longest time, for probably 20 hours of my training, I was using it purely for cruising and being level out and and climbs, and that was pretty much the only place I was using trim. And the biggest detriment to my flying was coming in from landings when I was having to fully grip the yoke. Thinking about having to use two hands to keep the nose up on final, and it just made my landing so bad.
Yeah, the like what I'm noticing too is about that specifically. I mean, and the controls feeling heavy is like you don't realize it when you've got two hands. You don't realize how much you are allowing yourself to like fight this airplane, and really like as you reduce that power and you're bringing that airspeed down and down like on those legs of the pattern in particular, um and you've got this thing trimmed for 90 or you have it trimmed for 80, but you're slowing down to 75 and now 70 and now 65 and now 60, like that airplane is getting, but you don't touch the trim at all, it's trimmed for 80 knots still or 85. And so those controls are getting heavy, and so it's like good luck going into ground effect power idle and maintaining that level pitch attitude while the airplane is in ground effect, and allowing good luck not allowing that plane to sink so hard that it lands flat. Good luck really properly smoothly flaring when you're like gotta put more muscle into it. It's like it shouldn't be that way.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So workload management with the trim, absolutely. Trimming a little bit more. That'll be super sick for your instrument. It's all, dude. You'll get so good at trim. Um, and so you said trim, and what was the other thing you said?
Just having like just proper instrument flows,
Oh
even for
right,
being
scanning.
VFR,
Sure. Mm.
just knowing what you need to be looking at and don't oversaturate yourself with things that don't actually matter.
Right, right. There's always a million different places to look, right? But first of all, most of the answers are outside, and with the movement of the horizon, and then I think what you're getting at too, and you're alluding to things that like a cornerstone of attitude instrument flying is the prioritization of certain instruments that are directly relevant to what you're trying to do right now, and just exclude everything else. Or if something is changing, like let's say you're doing like a steep turn, right, and you want to roll out on heading, student would think, well, I need to look at my heading indicator, or else I don't know what heading to roll out on. But you're like, no, we're not saying don't ever look at the heading indicator, but prioritize. You don't need, you're going through 360 degrees of heading change right now, so you don't need to focus on that. First of all, focus outside, and you got a visual reference that is coming up. But as you go through this turn, assuming that you're looking outside at the sight picture and the where the horizon's intersecting the nose cowling or the instrument panel or whatever, you just need your attitude indicator, making sure that it's 45, and your VSI. Make sure that thing is pinged at 0. Or at least if it's not, that you make those small corrections like ahead of time, because the trend information is immediate, and the rest just look outside and let the sight picture take care of it. You come around to your visual reference, yeah, then now incorporate your heading indicator into your scan, right? But you don't need that until later, so prioritize. Very, very cool, man. So so your check ride prep, you finally get signed off, and what was it like? Did you have any problems with the airplane and airworthiness or maintenance or anything like that? Maintenance logs and hours or anything like that in terms of the preliminaries? Any issues?
I mean, other than the biggest tip I can give is just be really neat and right with your logbook, because it was a pain totaling my hours, because I'm terrible with writing with a pen and I mess things up, and it's hard to read sometimes. So it took me a good 30 minutes to total all my time, which was the hardest part of it.
Yeah, you got that doctor handwriting.
Exactly.
Cool, man. So yeah, so definitely be neat, be organized in all aspects, and then so you show up to the check ride. Um, and and typically what happens is the examiner, like, they review your hours, your IACRA application, and the airworthiness of the airplane, and then the test begins. And so, did everything line up properly with the airworthiness and stuff like that, with the inspections and the entries and the logs?
Yeah, and we the day before, me and my instructor had actually gone through and checked that all
Good.
prior. So that's a big thing. Is definitely if your instructor doesn't offer it, I definitely ask them, be like, can we go through the logbooks for the airworthiness and the inspection that it's been through, just so I know exactly where to look. I even had a sticky note that had the actual dates and when they expire and everything like that on standby for the check ride.
Awesome. 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 Very, very cool, man. Very cool. Now we're at the top of the hour. We're coming up on an hour. So I mean, you got another maybe like 20 minutes or so in you to actually talk about some of the details of the check ride itself.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, awesome, dude. I'd love to. I'd love to. So I got the ACS out here right now. Now that the hours are done, your application's been reviewed, and the maintenance logs are all checked out. The examiner's like, and the test has officially begun, and you're like, oh god. So, um, first of all, big picture, like, did you like the examiner? Were they nice or like intimidating, or like what were they like?
Yeah, I had kind of a non-standard approach to it because the check airman was actually an instructor at the flight school as well. So I'd done one flight with them, so I kind of knew their personality before going in. Um, but it's definitely when their personality definitely shifts when they're in check ride mode. So
Yeah,
it's
right.
not always a good tell. But yeah, I generally she was a really nice person. She wasn't too hard and
Very
just
cool.
got through what she needed to pretty much.
Very cool. Very cool. That's always super crucial. Like, examiners can be like intimidating, or, was she actually of the kind of examiner that was a teaching examiner? Like, did she allow for opportunities for you to learn on this check ride, or was it very much like, do you know it? Oh, so you don't know it? Or, I've kind of
Yeah,
encountered, yeah.
it was kind of in between where she let me know beforehand. She said the FAA doesn't allow me to teach in any way, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So talking to me about how her being silent and writing things down is not an indicator of me doing bad. It's just what she needs to do, and just so that she can remember things. The only time that there was ever just a little bit of help from the check airman was there was one question during the oral portion where I had given kind of a vague answer, and she kind of gave me a leading prompt to kind of get my brain to remember what I needed to.
Okay. Yeah, a little helpful nudge here and there, like, and stuff, and I think, like you're saying, it's the distinction is that there's no like teaching of new information on here, but I mean, if there's a task that can maybe be done, that you did succeed in, and they didn't teach you about this procedure, but they're like, hey, for future, like, maybe this is an alternative way maybe you can go about it, or you really don't, like, you did a great job, but you really only need this and that, like, you don't need, and that's what I mean by like teaching, moments where it's like, to the limits of their ability, like, can't, some examiners I've seen will not hesitate to kind of refine, some procedure that you're already like aware of and stuff. So that's cool that she kind of walked the line a little bit, like, in a couple instances. So that's cool. So let's see here. So you got the oral portion and the flight portion. That a check, for those of you that you don't know, the check ride portion is basically two two segments. The first is kind of the more nerve-wracking one, which is the oral portion, where you're sitting across and you're talking about. Well, Zach, like, what's your experience? So you got the two sections, right? What were some of the differences, the oral and the flight?
Yeah, so the oral was way less stressful than I was expecting it to be.
Oh, you
Um,
said less, or I'm
I
sorry, less or more?
less.
Oh, okay, phenomenal.
because at this point I had been through 2 weeks of really, really rigorous,
Mm,
ACS standards every single day, and just going through every piece of knowledge that the FAR and the AIM have basically.
mm-hmm.
And for it to be kind of boiled down to what the FAA expects you to know, is a whole lot different. And I was expecting it to be way longer and way tougher, and
Mm-hmm.
the airmen being, digging into topics that I didn't know about,
Mm-hmm.
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked at the flight plan, and just very scenario based, that you can really pull your knowledge out from easier than just reading off of textbook definitions.
I love it. Practical. Like, this is called the practical test after all, right?
Yeah.
Totally. Um, that's great, dude. That's great. I mean, being over prepared, I think, is the way to go. Some people, they'll like lash themselves though. Like, they'll go way overboard, and I think that there's a line there of like diminishing returns where, dude, you're not, people with the most battle scars are not necessarily going to be the most successful. So don't go in there like having you know, beat your own ass for like, months and thinking like, that's the best way. It's like, work smarter, not harder. Have good work ethic and put the work in, but like, be smart about it, but it sounds like you were right in the middle there, where it's like right where you want to be. You want to be like a little over prepared. It's better to be a little bit higher standard or a little bit more than what ends up happening, and then being able to throttle that versus like coming up short, obviously, and trying to, figure it out in the moment. So let's see here. Yeah. Let's see. So the ACS talks about well, let me just ask you actually right off the bat, like, how did personal minimums come out? Personal minimums is something that's such an important like cornerstone of good decision making, and like demonstrating an awareness of your own limitations as a private pilot applicant in this check ride. So how did the examiner? What are some examples of instances, maybe even going through your cross country, for example, that the examiner explored your personal minimums, and how did you organize and articulate the personal minimums? How did those discussions come about?
Yeah, so that was one moment where I got kind of lucky in the oral exam. I had called a briefer earlier that morning about the winds at the destination, and there was a crosswind component of something like 8,
Mm-hmm.
and I told her my personal minimums for crosswinds were 10 knots, and I honestly hadn't even considered it, whether it was a no go at that point. And she asked me what the winds were and what runway we'd be using, and then she told me to kind of check the crosswind component for that runway that day. And luckily, it was at like 8 or something like that. And I definitely got lucky there, and it seemed like I did it, but I didn't quite know.
Gotcha. So yeah, your personal minimums sounded like they were defined. They were quantified. There was a hard number. It wasn't like, well, my personal minimum is where the wind is a lot, and it's like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? So they were quantified, and then but it was kind of getting hairy where it legitimately was kind of coming close to your limit, and it's like, dude, am I gonna like, what am I gonna do? It's an interesting situation where it's like, and obviously if it met or exceeded your personal minimum, you're not going to go. But it's kind of an interesting thing where it's like personal minimums, we discuss them, we write them out, we get them as known quantities, and then it's like, yet only in the situations where we're actually coming up to our personal minimums, like the weather itself, whatever we're talking about, whether it be clouds or wind or whatever, as that's kind of getting closer to your personal minimums, you're like, oh my God, like I'm actually Like, what am I gonna, it's in one situation in the abstract, you're like, cool, dude, 10 knots, 3,000 foot ceilings, like this and that. All right, sweet, got it. But, when wind can be variable and clouds are coming and they're going, and what is the TAF? What's the TAF's telling you kind of conflicting information? In real world, it can be kind of a challenge to know, like when the weather starts encroaching on your limits, it can be kind of a tough thing, I imagine.
Yeah, and that was another one where I kind of got lucky as well, because the weather that day was pretty much the perfect check ride weather you could possibly
Sick.
ask for. There were no clouds, winds aloft were really, really calm. There was no NOTAMs, nothing. Like it was completely perfect that day, which definitely helped me out a bunch.
Yeah. Sick. Very, very cool. Very cool. Okay, so personal minimums come out. Did you show up to the check ride with like them written down?
I didn't know, so I just had them in my head, basically.
Gotcha. It sounds like a terrible student, bro. No. No, you're a great student. But yeah, so that's definitely one way to go about it. It sounded like the examiner didn't mind. I know, like for my students, I try and for anybody watching, like it's really good to like definitely have them known, have them in your head, have them well defined. But to go in, try and like have them like written down. It can be helpful, especially when you're looking at weather data that can be variable, and you have them all written down right there. You have them written down like in ink. And so that way it's like you go to your sheet, you go to your personal minimum sheet, and the idea is that no matter what you do, personal minimums change obviously over time, but no matter what, that day is not that you're going to go fly is not going to be a day where those change. Even if you had been building up to it and you had been working on your personal minimums and you've been working on maybe higher winds or, maybe not 5,000 foot ceilings, maybe 3,000 foot ceilings for pattern work or whatever it is. No matter what, that day, those numbers do not change. That's a rule that I have adopted from Jason Miller of the Finer Points. Jason Miller, Finer Points, and Chris Palmer from Angle of Attack and Aviator Cast are two phenomenal CFIs that I would definitely recommend if listening to their podcast if you don't already. I've been interviewed on both of them, and they're just phenomenal guys. Jason is the one that I've heard explicitly talk about have as a standard operating procedure for yourself, never changing those numbers the day of, no matter what. So something to think about, especially for you, buddy, when you're going into your instrument. I'm glad that we met, and like no matter whether you come down here in Costa Mesa, and I have the privilege of working with you, or even with your instructor, if you roll with the same instructor, those do need to be written down. Those absolutely for your instrument rating, dude. Personal minimums is you're gonna see if you don't already, if your dad hasn't already talked about it, like Part 91 minimums, like legal minimums, they do not, dude. They don't protect you in any way, dude. They do not protect you in any way. They protect the FAA. So, getting those personal minimums down on, like, for example, departing an airport IFR is super crucial. But I'm glad that it worked out.
Yeah, no, and it definitely would have helped me catch that kind of blindside question that she asked me to if I would have had them written down. So I would definitely get those written down.
Love it
for next time.
Love it. Okay, so you're going through your cross country. First of all, when did you get your cross country assignment from this DPE?
I got it at 7:00 the night before.
What?
Because
dude?
I had kind of dropped the ball on sending in my test scores to her.
Okay.
On her personal form that she has, and dropped the ball, and then she was busy and couldn't send it until later that night. So I was up close to all night. I got 2.5 hours of sleep before the check ride.
Ooh, do you recommend going to a check ride with 2 hours of sleep?
Absolutely not. It was the worst experience ever.
No, I'm messing with you. Yeah, so that, yeah, that's rough, dude. Yeah, even more congratulations are in order then. Yeah, that's pretty brutal. That's pretty brutal. So, the cross country, um, you said it was scenario based. So, was the scenario just kind of, were the scenarios like, if you have a problem here, like what about like, let me just ask you a different question actually with regard to the cross country and scenario based training. Did an alternate airport ever come up?
No. So she didn't cover that section, but I had picked several out on the way there,
Hmm,
especially during areas where there could be limited visibility because of the mountains um, and stuff like that. But
gotcha.
it didn't come up during the oral exam.
Gotcha. Did the I mean, regulations obviously are a big part of the way that you're going to talk about, how did you select your altitude? What type of weather did you look at? Like, talk to me about these runways that at your departure and your destination. We're talking about 91-103 pre-flight action. And to me, for my students, I teach them 91-10. I have a before we fly ground lesson that we do multiple, like 2 or 3 times, just to really make sure that we got all three categories of things that we need to start thinking about before we go flying. First category is 91-103 pre-flight action items. Second category are pilot documents. Third category is airworthiness, right? We learned about aero. So with 91-103, did that come up in your check ride sort of like indirectly, or was it like more these regulatory questions, pre-flight in particular? Was it just like an outright regulation question, like what's this, or did that actually come out as a scenario, related to scenario based training in the cross country? Like, how did 91-103 pre-flight action come about?
Yeah. So those first few sections in the ACS, she just kind of asked FAA regulation way, where she was we're getting ready for the flight. What documents do you need to have with you?
Mm-hmm.
What things do you need to have looked at before we go on this flight? What pre-flight actions have you taken so far?
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay, I see. So they came up kind of the items came up naturally when they would have in the in as the conversation unfolded.
Exactly. Yeah.
I see. Phenomenal. Yeah, really, really important regulation, that 91-103. Did the scenario remaining in this topic of scenario based, training in the cross country, like, did she ever put you in a scenario where you had to exercise your 91-3 authority of the PIC?
Yes. Kind of indirectly.
Okay.
It was a no radio situation of,
Oh, yeah.
what do you need to do if you have no radios? You can't talk to tower.
Mm-hmm.
What are your options to get the plane back on the ground safely without having any traffic interfere with it?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Definitely. Um, Very good. Very good. Okay, cool, man. Were there any and I imagine, and coming up naturally in the conversation, 91-205, like required equipment and inoperative equipment, 213, how you're going to handle, usually it's like a landing light or something. Was there like an inop equipment discussion at all?
Yeah, so that came down to for like nav lights and
Mm,
anti-collision lights, stuff like that was the scenario she gave me.
yeah, and like nighttime, like it was like anti-collision or nav lights, but like prior to sunset or something.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, cool, man. Very cool. So, you're walking through the oh yeah. So, what was your approach to discussing the weather for this cross country, like in this oral portion of the check ride? Like, did you come up and did you just stick to like are you using ForeFlight or Garmin or
Yeah, I use ForeFlight.
ForeFlight? ForeFlight's the shit, dude. Yeah. Were you just using ForeFlight? Did you I use 1-800-WXBrief.com, and I will have a standard briefing sent to me. And this, how did you actually, but some people, and I mean, I've printed out the data and brought the electronic version. Some examiners are cool with everything electronic. You can even bring a computer. So how did you actually approach the weather briefing discussion and NOTAMs and forecasts and stuff like that?
Yeah, so the first thing I did is I showed up at the airport about 6 in the morning. It was 2 hours before my check ride, and first thing I did was I called a briefer from WX Brief. I actually called the phone number and had a notepad out, and he kind of dictated out everything that was going on in the area in a standard briefing. And then from there, I had kind of really general, some specific for TFR and NOTAMs and runway closures and stuff like that. But weather, I had kind of a very basic understanding from him. And then next thing I did is I went inside the FBO, I hopped on one of the computers, and went to aviationweather.gov and wxbrief.com. And then from there, I got the rest of my weather briefing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because it's kind of nice being able to ask an actual expert about their opinions on things and what's happening.
I was just gonna ask you that actually. So totally on the same page. What did you feel like in comparison? It sounded like that you appreciated that utilizing that. Really, I mean, we're trying to use all available resources, right? So why not call the guy and get some clarification maybe on stuff. Especially NOTAMs. I really like talking to somebody about VORs that are closed. I might miss those NOTAMs or something, and VFR recommended, is an interest. What's their professional opinion?
Yeah, and that's one thing. When you call them and you say, hey, I've got a VFR flight today, they know to kind of leave out the ILS, the VR DME stuff, and all that, and kind of give you the main information that you need to know for a solely VO or VFR flight.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think circling back again, to our opening discussion about humility and just dialing it back and realizing that we've got a long way to go. We are not experts. We are not experts in the interpretation of this information. And I think when you're a pilot, an applicant, you do know a lot. You know a lot of things that you didn't used to know, but you got a long way to go. There's no shame in saying, I want to make sure that I got this right. I don't have 20 years of looking at these charts and knowing what the actual patterns are likely to be or whatever. I do have a lot of really good tools for myself, but I'm going to ask. Then the importance of asking for help, right?
Yeah, and those briefers on the phone are super nice, and they want to answer every question that you have about the weather and stuff. So
Totally.
Definitely a good resource.
Totally. All right, fantastic, man. So the weather. Let's see. So that is pretty. That's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool that you had you had multiple aspects about the weather that you were amassing for yourself. All right. Let's see here. Okay. Oh, you know what? I did have a question about pre-flight prep task E, National Airspace System. Okay, so you're in an area not super crazy airspace wise, definitely crazy in terms of density, altitude, performance, limited piloted spots, limited VORs and stuff, and very, very good that these limitations are there because that you're really getting sharp, but not a lot of airspace around from what I can tell. I could be wrong about that. I'm not looking at the sectional right now. I just remember flying in the area in the sim a couple times, not a whole lot out there. So what was that discussion like for her to make sure? You said the examiner was a female, correct?
Yeah.
So for her to make sure that you can understand that you really understand some of the crazier airspace, like was there an area of the country that she went to that where you had a more involved discussion about airspace, or did you really just stick to your area and making sure that you know had an well, what was an adequate level of knowledge for airspace wise, like in your experience on this check ride?
Yeah, so she went over our airspace specifically for a little bit and asked me questions to make sure I understood my airspace really well.
Mm.
And then that airspace that we were talking about on the previous stream that you had, that Salt Lake Bravo, we moved down to
Yes.
there for the rest of the flight plan because that's where she had me go through and plan
Yes.
through.
Damn,
And
dude. Yeah, sorry.
we went through that a whole lot more.
That definitely ought to do it, bro. I will just say that. That
That's what took me the long. That's why I was up for almost all night. Was
dude.
just trying to figure out that Bravo.
Yes, that ought to do it, bro. That ought to do it. That's borderline cruel and unusual punishment. That okay. Yeah, and good for you, by the way. I mean, you know, being in Los Angeles, Just Killer, what's going on? It's been a while. Just being and even being in Los Angeles, being trained in Los Angeles, instructing in Los Angeles, flying single pilot IFR here in the rapid transitioning of airspace, like all through different types of airspace, like I mean layers of airspace and all VFR transitions and special flight rules. Like with that experience, I looked at that the other night and you were there. I mean, I was like, dude, I'm going to need like a minute. I'll say that, like, to kind of figure out like what best is, and we were actually working together on what ended up happening. And oh yeah, that makes sense, you know, and this and that. But that was absolutely super challenging. And I'm sure that you were surprised by that challenge, no doubt about it, right?
Oh yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. But you definitely rose to the occasion. She knew what she was doing, dude.
Oh yeah, definitely.
What the F, bro? So yeah, yeah, that was intense. So that absolutely, you know, covered it in terms of airspace and utilizing airspace. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So yeah, very, very good. Very good. Oh hey, you were asking me actually about class golf and the blue, I believe, before, right? We were looking at your neck of the woods for I remember that. We were talking about Echo and golf, and like the 700 inside and 1200 outside is a rule inside of the blue. Actually, did she actually get into any weird golf or anything?
Yeah, so she actually pulled up those cutouts up in the Montana area
No way.
um for kind of out there golf knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. Sick. Good. Good. Awesome. My last question that I had about or I had maybe a couple questions about the oral left. Number one, did the special emphasis items that you sat in on a couple of ground school sessions that unfortunately got expired before I was linking up my Twitch to my YouTube, so I'm gonna have to go do those again and export them over. But those were a couple of really good sessions. I love talking about special emphasis items like the areas. Did those ever come up explicitly, or were they more implicit, like controlled flight into terrain and like how did you choose your altitude, or like runway incursion never really came up except for like in the plane make sure to have your airport diagram out? Did they come up in the oral in any way, like or sort of explicit like that, or did you find them just kind of it's good knowledge to have and it actually none of them really came up too crazy?
Yeah, so they didn't come up too crazy. It was more kind of things I dropped in between some of the answers I gave, that I could definitely tell she was impressed by, but she never asked anything specifically about them.
Good. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, the risk management items kind of really do like take care of that, and they will come up organically, like in those conversations. That's why I am a fan of actually of the ACS, of the format for early training. Totally, dude. And guidance on, yeah. So that's cool, man. That's cool. All right. So, oh, dude. Um, Last question about let's see here. Yeah, last question about the oral, and make just a couple questions about the flight, and we could wrap this up. Is systems. So you were operating with a constant speed propeller. You obviously had to explain that.
Yeah.
So the level of explanation, though, surely was not the standard was not a commercial student like going for a CFI after, right? But it was a system nonetheless that you had to explain. So I mean, do you feel like, how did that conversation go? I mean, you just never hear about that and for a private pilot check ride.
Yeah, it went well because she wasn't looking for me to have a mechanics level knowledge on it. It was basically, tell me the chain of things interfacing with each other
Good.
and the cause and effect of what things would do if you did this or if this part failed,
Yeah.
things like that.
Gotcha. Very practical. She sounds very fair. She sounds very fair.
Oh, extremely, yeah.
That's dope. That's super dope. And when you say cause and effect, I mean, are you, for example, talking about like pitching down or pitching up, like in
Yeah,
disturbing,
and
right?
then yeah,
Okay.
and then she asked me, when you actually turn that prop back, what is happening on the inside of the nose of the propeller, and how is that knob interfacing to cause that change?
Gotcha. Like what are this? Yeah, like what's the? Okay, that's cool, man. That's cool. Um, okay. All right. Sweet. Couple of questions about the flight. First of all, did anything surprising come up in the flight?
No, looking at the ACS, looking at the standards,
Pretty
um,
straightforward.
I assume most Czech pilots are going to be following that pretty to a T. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think they're going to interject anything that you're not prepared
Hmm.
for, except for the things in the ACS that say this could happen at any time type thing.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Um. Uh. So that's good. That's good. Yeah. I mean, that's why most of my questions about the oral and like what was important is because in the flight portion you just basically you got your checklist usage, right? Like you're going through your pre-flight, you're explaining like the airplane. You get in there, like you start it up, and you just basically you have pretty much like a type of flight that you've been doing. I mean, you do your same checklists. Like you're just very careful, obviously, but you're always careful. You're careful if you're solo. So in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, do you feel like you were operating just as you normally would, and you didn't feel like you had to play a role?
Yeah, well, I put myself in this headspace where the person sitting next to me is a friend of mine,
Love
and
it.
that really took a lot of the stress off.
Love it.
Was just act exactly like you would if we were, I was taking out one of my best friends or whatever to go fly that day.
Love it. Wise. So wise because obviously she's an examiner, but their role as an examiner is largely, other than, flowing in and out of state, like role playing states, largely they are of a role that they are an uneducated passenger, right?
Mm.
Yeah, so I mean that's a smart move to really like put yourself in that spot. You got in other examples of that, I'm sure maybe passenger briefing, um,
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff, right? All right, cool. The one question I did actually have, and we can wrap it up right here, was the diversion. So, how did the diversion go? When did it occur? And how did you set yourself? How were you trained to set yourself up for that diversion?
Yeah, so we had just taken off and we went to the first checkpoint in the nav log for dead reckoning and all that. Um, and then we did one maneuver. I think we did circles around a point or turns around a point. And right after that, she had told me, um, one of your passengers is feeling really sick.
Yes.
You should probably get down to the ground here soon. So from there, I used my GPS flipped it over to the closest airport, got a time and got a distance, got a heading, and from there, I just took it really slow and made sure that I knew exactly how I wanted to enter before I got in the vicinity of where I needed to start making radio calls for that airport. And from there, it was a pretty simple, normal 45-degree entry to the downwind and landing. I ended up opting to do a short field landing there because it was a 4,000-foot runway with a displaced threshold. But other than that, it went super smoothly.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Crucial to take things one step at a time with that, right?
Yeah.
Situational awareness of airspace, you know. A lot of the time, like down here, like I know for me, for my private pilot, like, you know, like very shortly after you depart, you know, for your cross country or whatever, you know, you divert, and my examiner diverted me on purpose to across the to an airport across the Bravo. We have a very we don't have a very it is very wide, like it is very like all encompassing, the LA Bravo, but it's quite long. It has like actual length to it. It kind of looks like an upside down staircase actually, because we're all like nestled in a basin here, and so there are multiple shelves, like as you go out and out on the final approach course down into LA, that you're able to fly under, but that some of them are quite low. Some of the shelves are 2,000, 2,005, 4,000. Obviously if it's not surface. So, you know, we're going to a place with a top of climb of, you know, 5,500 feet or whatever. And, so if you're coming up to a first checkpoint that is a beam of a 2,000-foot Bravo shelf, like, and he diverts you north across the Bravo, he wants to see, do you know where you are? Do you know where that airspace is between you and where you need to be, where you're going to divert to, and can you do something about it? You know, can you use your pilotage to know where that shelf is? And or, you know, get that Bravo clearance or whatever it is, but you can't just go north and just go, okay, now we're doing this, and like not having an awareness there. So in your diversion, like was there an airspace challenge that you had to reckon with, or was it mostly the navigation, the fuel consumption, and that kind of stuff, the normal diversion things? Not that airspace isn't a normal concern, but I'm just saying, like, was it for out here, that's a very, very high, you know, that's an issue. Whereas certain places, it's something you know, it's still an issue, but there's nothing around, you know. So I mean, how did you fare with? You have stuff around you. So what was your experience like regarding airspace specifically and positional awareness?
Yeah, so airspace, it wasn't a major concern because every airport within 20 miles of that spot where we had started to divert from was they're all uncontrolled airports. So we know it's all Gulf airports basically, but there is quite a bit of traffic down that in that area. So getting on that right frequency, making your call, early and in a timely manner, so people know where you're at, where you're coming from, was really important as well.
Right. I think that's really well said. That's really well said. It's like, yeah, it's not the craziest airspace in the world. Neither is it down here, but it is pretty nuts. But it doesn't need to be like, you know, a total circus for it to be a concern, where it's like, either way, you have certain duties to set yourself up to commit. In some ways, it's actually kind of crazier, because you've got all this non-towered stuff going on, and you need to make these position reports. You need to know exactly where you are just as much, because you need to be making these position reports and making sure that you're looking out for all this uncontrolled, you know, yeah, you're in class echo up until that point, but these are non-controlled Gulf airports at the surface. Like, we need to be very cautious of what is going on. Not everybody follows the rules, right? So different concerns, but it's super important nonetheless. So setting yourself up, and right.
And we actually had a helicopter that was going to be crossing over our flight path pretty much the exact same time that we were going to. and being aware of not only where you are, but keeping that mental image of where other aircraft are in the area can really keep you safe. If you don't know that, then there's no way that you're going to be able to avoid traffic.
Oh, especially, I can't agree with you more. Like, especially with that high workload, communication and, you know, speaking and listening are are a couple of the first things to go when the water level's up, and your situational awareness just deteriorates rapidly, and before you know it, you haven't looked outside in like 10 minutes because you're down here looking at your chart, or you know, you're calculating fuel, or you know, oh, my altitude is off, and now you're fixating on your altimeter. It's like, dude, where is the terrain? Like, where is like the traffic? Like, who's looking outside, you know? So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so workload management for sure, dude. Buddy, that's really all the questions that I mean, really only all the questions we have time for, I think. I could definitely talk to you about this for the next, 5 hours. And I think you've sat in on enough of my ground school sessions to know that I can do that, but I'm not going to do that. But I just wanted to say that I am super proud of you for this achievement. And yes, it's one, small step in the long, rewarding path of your flight training, but it's such a huge one at the same time. It's a great achievement, and yeah, really proud of you, dude. And just keep at it. And I'm here to help. We're all here to help whenever we can. I know you got a handle on it, but just keep pushing, dude. And so yeah, I'm proud of you, dude. And nice job.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate all the hard work that you put into the stream, and helping people further their understanding of aviation for sure.
You got it, man. You got it. Yeah, much appreciated. Kind words. And yeah, and thank you for joining me today to discuss, and for everybody, to be able to help them and help them appreciate what goes into the training and the final stages of your training and the check ride. And yeah, just great talk, dude. So thanks for being on, and we'll definitely talk soon. I'll probably stream something tonight, maybe some video games or something like that. But yeah, we'll definitely talk soon. And thanks again for the chat, buddy. You're awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon, bud. See ya.
Bye bye.